get things. And so right now we want to welcome Julie. Welcome. Wendy and I are both part of SENC, which had advertised this event. And then Marie-Hélène and Sandra are part of the collaborative. So we want to thank them for taking the time just to share these really cool resources. Wendy and I are both working with them and just absolutely love this platform. And so I'm just going to turn the time right over to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a presentation. And I should probably start by saying that I am speaking to you today from Hamilton, Ontario. So because, I'm a professor at McMaster University, and Marie-Hélène is a PhD student at McMaster University. We are situated on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee people. And I think it's always interesting to think about where we are and who we're talking to when we're sort of addressing a crowd that is, potentially from all over the country and all the different traditional territories of the First Nations and Métis and Inuit people. And so I'm here to talk to you about the collaborative. So I am very happy to know that the collaborative is now considered to be a resource, for instance, by the Ontario Teachers Secondary OSSTF. Is that it? Yeah, so the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, because that means that we are providing value to teacher. But it's hard to think of from my perspective, it's hard to think of the collaborative and the collaborative inquiry specifically as a resource, because it really is more like a labor of love. So I thought that I would start the presentation by saying a little bit about where it comes from, how it all began, because the motivations for the collaborative really are rooted in the concerns of someone like me, who is an academic, whose research is supposed to be serving society, but it's not always obvious that it is. So 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I was asked to be the president of the Canadian Philosophical Association. And one of my first assignment was to go to this conference that was organized by the Federation of the Humanities and Social Sciences. It's an organization that federates all the academic association in all those subjects that are covered in social studies. And I was attending a workshop, among others, on impact. And that's when I realized that what my discipline, I'm a philosopher by training, I'm a complete nerd, just like this woman on the screen. We have a serious problem when it comes to actually providing value or creating impact or helping societies change for the better, because, well, we kind of stuck in this ivory tower. So I started asking myself quite a few questions, like, what are we actually doing in the social science and humanities and in the arts as well when it comes to helping our communities? I mean, we're supposed to be helping our communities, but I was thinking about myself as a philosopher and as a historian of logic. And, there was like a big gap, and I was not happy with the idea, oh, what I'm doing is fundamental research and you don't have to worry about this, because this is the sort of thing that you sometimes hear. So, but I was also getting the sense that even in disciplines like sociology and anthropology and economics and political science, there was sort of a gap, or there was a real there were real barriers to impact in the community. So I wanted to know, what could we do differently? And then ask myself questions. Well, I'm a researcher, but is research really the only vehicle for an academic to create impact? And of course, what are actually the needs of our communities when it comes to impact. And you know, it's always a little bit more messy than that in history, but for some reason, we really got interested in trying to figure out what are the needs of teachers in primary and secondary schools when it comes to, you know, sort of the kinds of things that we academics could do. How could we, and I wanted to know, how could we meet those needs? So, you know, one thing led to another, and we had this idea of creating a platform that would be designed primarily to help secondary school teachers, but also primary school teachers who are doing inquiry in the classroom, and to change the way in which we think about the sort of like, let's bring an academic in the classroom format, and to really make it about the needs of the teachers. So when people invite academics or researchers or university-based educators in their classroom, it's often to give a talk, and that's great, that's fine. But the people with whom we work, and many of them were actually members of SANC, people like Rachel Kalisha or Jan, oh, now I'm blanking on her name, but the unforgettable Jan, they were telling us, you know, when we conduct inquiry with our students, we know how to conduct the inquiry. We're like very good at the didactic. What we would need would be sort of the expertise around the specific projects, because as soon as the students start, you know, deepening their learning experience and sort of go down the rabbit holes, they come up with all sorts of questions, which, you know, a teacher is not necessarily equipped to answer. So the kinds of needs that teachers were telling us they have around inquiry really is about sort of mobilizing that know-how specifically in the classroom to answer these questions. So what we designed is a platform that does that. And the idea, which is very important in all of the projects that the collaborative does, is that when it comes to creating impact, academics are not supposed to just show up and say, hey, I'm the expert. No, there's expertise all around the table. And what's really important is the connection, that sort of gelling that is going to make the collaboration very fruitful. And so that's the reason why our platform really is just like a big dating website. What we do is take requests from teachers who are conducting inquiry in the classroom, and we look at their needs, and then we find an expert that is available, that has this expertise, and we bring them together, and we support that connection. And so far, that's been, I think, the key to a lot of very successful collaborations. So here is how it works. So I'm going to introduce you to Jennifer. Jennifer is a high school teacher. She teaches economics, and she's using inquiry and problem-based learning in the classroom where students are smart and they have a lot of questions. And what she would like, if she had a magic wand, would be to bring someone in the classroom who could just sit down, open up their office hours, and answer students' questions because they have the expertise. And I'm going to introduce you to Zara, and Zara is a philosophy professor like me. So she's an expert in her field, and actually she's published quite a few studies on social issues and economics, and she's interested in community engagement. Like, she'd like to connect, but it's sort of like really hard to do that. But you know, she has the love of, she loves her discipline, and she'd be able to share. She's the perfect resource to solve Jennifer's problem, but the problem is that they don't know each other. Enter the collaborative. Our job is to just bring Jennifer and Zara together for a collaborative process that is going to actually sort of meet both needs. On the one hand, the needs of Jennifer for expertise, and on the other hand, the needs of Zara, because Zara also has needs. She needs to have impact. She needs to mobilize her knowledge. So we're just sort of the connection between the two. So that's, we're using an online platform to do that. And so the teachers sign up and they make a collaboration request, and then a connection broker comes in, looks at the request, and his job or her job or their job is to find the expert that's going to meet these needs, and then to bring the two people together. In this case, Jennifer and Sarah, they are introduced to one another through that broker. And the broker is there to support them in building that collaboration, building that relationship that is a new relationship. And so what we've tried to do is to really focus on streamlining the whole process, both for the teacher and for the academics. So you have a connection broker that supports you. And for the academics, it's simple because it's about sharing their expertise in a way that is very similar to just opening up the doors of your office to students. And so they're already familiar with that, and they don't have to prepare. They can just show up and they're ready because they have broad disciplinary expertise to tackle a bunch of questions. And on the other hand, well, you have the teacher who's made a request about an activity that is very well known, and who can trust that the person who's going to show up in the classroom is going to have been vetted because they are part of, an institution, ideally a university in their community, so that they can reconnect maybe and do something in person. But the connection is seamless, and it can be an in-person, an online session, but it is something that is very effective. You have an expert who shows up, answers questions, and then, if there is a need for follow-up, we can always organize that. Yeah, so that's sort of like our moonshot vision. So the teacher, through this activity, is going to provide their student with a unique learning experience, and one through which they benefit directly from the expertise of people from academia. And that sort of opens up possibilities in terms of like the students' own understanding of how accessible universities is. If university teachers or university-based educators start showing up in your classroom, well, it's probably because, it's not that far, and maybe that's accessible to them as well. And on the other hand, so the academic does something that they really, really like. They inspire students. And that's basically something that every academic I know is very keen to do, and to share their passion about their discipline. So that sort of is the pitch, where it comes from, how it works. And now I'm going to invite you. I see that some people have joined us in the meantime to scan the QR code and go see what it looks like on the platform. If you don't already have an account, I would, so right now it's completely free. We're academics. We're not in this for the money. As I said, this is part of sort of a vision to transform the way in which we create change and impact and well-being in our communities. So you have access to these resources at absolutely no cost. Creating an account takes 5 minutes, and actually I think it's probably a good idea to take the time to create an account. So I'm going to, unless you don't want to, but if you do, then I can walk you sort of through the process. So I'm gonna leave you a few minutes to go take a look. And if you have any questions, I'm looking at the chat, and Marie-Hélène, who is our coordinator, is also looking at the chat. So if there's any questions, just let us know. If everything seems to be going smoothly, let us know. What do you think, Jennifer?
I think that's great. And I thought one of the things that really helps, Wendy and I have both found as we're trying to really share the benefits of the platform, as people go, but I don't see how I could use this in my classroom. And, there's just so many different ways that, again, it's not about bringing in a guest speaker. It's about, having these experts. And I found, so one of the ways that I used it was with my grade 9 students. They actually wrote their inquiry questions, And then I was connected with an expert that met with them in small groups and reviewed their inquiry questions with them and said, how about you use this word instead? And how about you search this instead? And it'll help, like, what are you really trying to get to? And so they had the ideas that I hadn't even thought of, which is fantastic. But also the kids are just way more impressed with an expert coming in, and we had to zoom in, but the kids are used to Zoom now. And so they were fine with it. But I know Wendy's also done some really interesting things with the platform as well, of just all kinds of different opportunities.
Yeah.
Sure. So maybe when as people are signing up, if you're interested, I'll just kind of tell you how I used it. So I've used it twice. I teach junior high, and I used it with grade 8 and also grade 9. And my grade 8, it was a social studies class here in Nova Scotia, and we were looking at the theme of immigration. And so we had talked a little bit about Canada's immigration history, and they had questions about, is Canada really as friendly as everybody says it is? What is it like to be a child when your parents make the decision to immigrate? Is the experience between immigrants and refugees any different? And so they had questions, and like Jennifer, when I contacted the collaborative, they put me in touch with a researcher whose area was immigration. He spoke, and he was happened to be from McMaster, but he spoke with my class via Zoom. And this was actually before the pandemic, believe it or not. So we were just kind of like, Zoom was like, woo. And so he just spoke to them for about 5 minutes as a whole class. And then what I did was I set up a second computer in the room next door, and each group went in. They had already met to talk about the kinds of questions they were interested in asking, and each group spent 10 minutes with the expert, and he kind of gave them a hand in sort of, honing, narrowing down their question. And then the other time and that was awesome. And then the other time that I used it was in my grade 9 citizenship class, social studies class, because I had a group of students who were just a little bit exceptional. It was sort of towards the end of the year, and they had been working, sort of above standard or above expectations through most of the year. And I thought it might be a rewarding experience for them to talk to somebody who lived their life in research. And so we were doing a global citizenship project. And so I got in touch with the collaborative again, and they put me in contact with a PhD student. And she was at Carleton, and what she did was she just talked to my students about research in general. How do you formulate a question? How do you find resources that are reliable? What do you do if all of your resources seem to be leaning to one side? Is that, should you look for something else? And so there were just 7 students who participated in that, and I specifically selected them because they had been kind of performing above expectations, and I thought it would be a nice kind of opportunity for them. They were students who were likely to enjoy kind of those conversations and research. So there's different ways that people can use it, and as a middle school teacher, it's not out of the question to have people in the academic world talk to students at that age. They were marvelous. They addressed my students really appropriately, knew a lot about their age, asked me a lot of questions beforehand about the kind of language that we use in our classroom. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not even a secret, but so your students benefit, but from the expert side, it's transformational too for someone to do a visit like that and see, because we teach these kids, but once they're 18, 19, 20, and they come into university, but it's been already such a long time since we were in high school, we've forgotten about it. So it's sort of like going back to the source, and it's when we were running the pilots, it was sort of really amazing to see how, even especially when it's in person, like coming into the classroom and sitting down with the students, it's something that is very, very valuable for the experts as well. And you mentioned, Wendy, that you had one expert from McMaster, one expert from Carleton. Do you know, Jan, where your expert was from?
Oh gosh, I can't remember.
But it could
But
have
it was
been
a Zoom, right?
anywhere.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
a grad student, so.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'll say two things. So first of all, the experts, we recruit our experts from across Canada, across provinces in both languages. So we offer the collaborative in both English and French. And the idea is, I mean, ideally what we would want is to be able to build relationships in a community between a school and the local university so that these collaborations can grow into something more. Right, that's just sort of like getting a step in the door. You start building your relationship, it goes well. Who knows what else can happen? But it's also really exciting to have an expert from British Columbia show up if you're in New Brunswick, or sort of like gives you sort of like, wow, there's expertise across the country. And the reason why we recruit experts in universities is because we want to make sure that we're recruiting people, you know, who are safe for your kids. We want to make sure that, and having an academic affiliation because of the kinds of codes of conducts under which we're supposed to be operating is sort of a warranty. That's not to say that there isn't expertise also in the community. I mean, there's tremendous expertise in the community, especially when you're thinking about, you know, Indigenous studies, and you really would want to go draw on Indigenous knowledges. But there are things that have to do with best practices that sort of make us say, maybe it's not a good idea to ask people who are working so hard to spare free time, whereas for an academic, it's basically their job to do this kind of stuff. So we have absolutely no shame. The second thing I wanted to say about graduate students. So, you know, graduate students are probably even more eager than we are to share their passion for their discipline. So we have developed a training program within the collaborative to train graduate students to become what we call inquiry consultants. So they receive training around collaboration and around, you know, the reality of what it is to teach inquiry in a secondary school classroom, or in even in a primary school classroom. I mean, this is also part of the scope of the project, so that they can be prepared to play that role of expert. With academics, we don't need to do this, because the cue is what an academic needs in order to be able to, you know, show up and do a good job is the following. We tell them it's like office hours, and here are some of the questions that you're going to need to answer. It's like office hours, for them, it means it's unstructured. I don't need to prepare anything. Students are going to have questions, and I just have to sort of say what I think, because that's the expertise that's needed. And then the questions are useful. So the reason why we ask you to prepare to share the questions of your student is because it's going to indicate to the expert what kind of register they need to be tapping into. Is it questions about global health, and how are they formulated? What kind? It gets them thinking, and they're going to be able to calibrate and talk exactly at the level that your students need. So that's easy. For graduate students, it's a little bit more difficult to understand, just because they don't have the experience of having had office hours. So we provide them with a little bit more context, a little bit more information about the process of inquiry, and the kinds of expectations, the kinds of things that they should be doing. And so far, what I'm hearing from Jennifer and Wendy and everyone else is that seems to be working just fine. So we're kind of happy about that. So
I'll also say that when my grade 9 students saw her, you know, join the Zoom, she was kind of, you know, young and hip, and they were like, oh wow, what a cool academic person. Like, I think they sort of think academic is, you know, the nutty professor, and so they could get to see this kind of like really interesting person who had common interests with them and uncommon interests. And so I think that that also went a long way, just in terms of um just having that sort of connection with somebody who was not a whole lot older than them, certainly not as old as their teacher.
Well, I mean, I think it's part of the idea. It's to, so I mean, and even those who are a little bit older, they usually are so keen and interested in sharing their ideas. You know, we all have different styles, and you know, the idea is that you're going to make more than one request, and you're going to get to meet many different academics over the course of your secondary school education. And that is going to make it easier for you to open the doors of university as a student, because you will already have had contact, and it will seem very natural to do that. And I mean, of course, you can also, I mean, we could do the same thing with college teachers, and it would also have the value for many students. The idea of going into higher education at all is something that is that comes with some psychological barriers, sociological barriers. And I think that the project really is about breaking down those barriers and creating more synergies between the secondary school and post-secondary school. So I don't know if you wanted me to say a little bit more, Jennifer. I had prepared a few slides about the platform. I'm sure you're going to have seen it if you logged in. But I'm going to walk you through it because, I mean, so once you're on the landing page, you scroll down a little bit and you just click join now. If you've already have created an account, you just log in, and it's going to take you up to this page, which is just about signing up. Once you actually create your account, just an email, by entering an email and a password. We're going to ask you a few more questions, but very, very limited, preference in language and stuff like that, what school you're at. But we're not in this business to collect information, but there is some information that's always useful to have, like where your school is, which province, so that we can figure out things about time zones and stuff like that. Once you've registered, you're going to be brought onto your dashboard. And on your dashboard, this is my dashboard, so it's very busy. Yours is going to have some info and then collaborations. And you just click on your collaborations, and just like that. Or you can also just click on the main thing. It's not very intuitive. And then you're going to be brought into your into the interface where all your collaborations are listed. And if you haven't had a collaboration before, it's going to be empty. And then what you do is actually click add. When you click add, you're going to be brought to the beginning of a new collaboration. And the first thing we're going to ask you to do is to choose which part of the inquiry process you'd like to have support with. And the idea here is to, I mean, we're assuming that you know a little bit about the inquiry, you know that there's a place where you formulate question, and there's a place, there's a phase in which you do research. There's a phase that corresponds to sort of like creating a draft, and then input. And so we've unpacked the process of inquiry in a way that we thought was reflecting the main distinctions that are made across the literature. So you choose the one that fits best what you want your students to experience. Greg, I see that you may have a question.
Yes,
Yeah,
I was gonna say something.
I have been wanting to ask about that last one that you actually have, Mark, the Introduction to Research seminar. And
Yeah.
I think that would be something my advanced placement teachers would be interested in doing.
Yeah.
As a group and in part of one of their specific courses. But can you tell us a little bit more about that specific one?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite ones because it is a partnership with the Conversation Canada. So I assume you're familiar with the Conversation Canada. Aha. So, I mean, it's a soft partnership with the Conversation Canada, but the reason why we partnered with the Conversation Canada is because the kinds of articles that are published in the Conversation Canada, they're always published by researchers, and even sometimes with the researchers with whom you're going to be collaborating. And they're written in a journalistic style that is actually equivalent to a level of, end of secondary school, beginning of university. So the partnership is as follows. The teacher selects this and then tells us what the topic is for the discussion that they would like to have. We immediately find an expert, and we ask the expert to find an article in the conversation that they would like to discuss with the students. And then the expert shares the article from the conversation with the broker. The broker sends it to the teacher, says, this is the piece that the expert is we call them experts, but of course teachers are expert too. The expert is going is interested in discussing, make sure that it's adjusted. And then what's interesting is that then the students all read the same piece. The expert knows what they're going to read. And then again, the expert just shows up and then answers questions around the piece. So this is more focused. It doesn't need to be embedded in one conversation. The reason why the conversation is interesting is because if you're in academia, you dream to publish in the conversation, because this is how you mobilize your knowledge broadly so that people can actually read you, as opposed to, you know, those obscure academic articles that you publish that no one understands. This is actually, you work with a journalist to, so it's a very good style, and it's very useful for, I mean, to gain more knowledge, but also students. So it's an interesting sort of like a little bit of a ball game between the teacher and the expert to select the text and the expertise, and then to make this the topic of a discussion, seminar discussion.
Would those topics be like, can you give me an example of one that's been done with that seminar discussion?
I mean, it could, in the conversation, there are thousands and thousands of articles on every single topic of actuality. So you'll have things on, one of my colleagues published an article on why we should be worried about fascism, because there are things that are coming up, that are coming back up. So, you know, you'll have something like that, or you'll have something on gene drives, or you'll have something on, you know, climate change. The range of topics is really quite wide. So the chances that you select a topic and there's nothing in a conversation about it would be quite small. At the same time, it's also more about the opportunity, right? Of getting someone to come and talk about a topic, even if it's, you know, not exactly what you needed to teach. It still is an opportunity for the students to get acquainted with the subject, to meet someone from academia, to ask questions for that exchange. So we're just really providing excuses for people to connect, and these excuses are at least relevant. You know, there's it's something that is going to create value for teachers. But I think our concern is really about the connection, because there's not enough connections between universities and secondary school, or post-secondary and secondary school.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I hope you do it. Let me know how it works.
Sandra, there's a question in the chat that I think would be interesting for you to actually answer. Is this option that you just discussed it generally for older grades?
I think
not,
that's
yeah.
probably right. So if you ask the conversation, so what sort of is the age range, or what is the how is this fine for secondary school? They'll usually say it's probably more like grade 12, 13, and first year university. So, but of course, if you want to challenge your students, that's a really good opportunity to do it too. So I don't think that the conversation is necessarily out of reach for someone who's in 10th or 11th or even in 9th grade, depending on the kind of topic that you want to take a look at. And it certainly is a really, really good opportunity to get acquainted with the kind of research that's being done in universities. All right. So going back to my presentation, or maybe I'll take a look, but Wendy is saying the other option in the first part are more widely possible for younger grades. Yeah, so if you go back to these other options, that really is, it really is something that can be calibrated to, I mean, if you're conducting inquiry in the classroom, our principle is that, or our approach is that you can contact us and we'll find someone to come and talk to your kids about some aspect of the inquiry process, help them think through the problem, through the question, give them input if there is if they are presenting something, that's also a possibility. Yeah. So this is sort of wrapping up. If you sign up for the inquiry platform, you have access to experts from across Canada, from across all universities in Canada. If we don't have an expert with the expertise that you're looking for, we'll find one. If you're telling us, I'd really like to be connected to an expert in my community, we'll find one. That's the job of the brokers, to recruit the expert that is needed if they're all not already on the platform. You just submit a collaboration request and the connection broker takes it from there. You don't even have to complete the collaboration request. We'll follow up to make sure, because sometimes it's not obvious. I think the questions that we're asking are pretty straightforward. It's really just information about your course, information about your availability, information about, you know, how many students do you have, and the kinds of themes that you'd like to explore. But we're there from the beginning. We'll follow up no matter what. And yeah, the advantages is not only that you're going to help your student deepen their experience as part of inquiry-based learning, but also hopefully that you'll be able to give them a taste of what happens at universities and make it exciting for them, and maybe strengthen their desire to continue to learn. And again, if you want to scan, I'm happy to leave that on and answer any more questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sandra. You really gave us a really good overview, and hopefully this can help those of you guys that have not used it before to have some ideas of how you might want to use it. Maybe even if it's not for this year, but you could kind of keep it in mind for next year once you know the courses that you're teaching. Like Wendy and I have both shared, we really, really appreciate this. I loved what you said about it being like a dating program. We're just trying to put the right people together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording now, but then we'll stay on in case people have questions. So it'll just take me a second to do that. So again, go ahead and please ask any questions that you might have.
Yes, we can also, I'm going to stop sharing and we can all come into the screen if we'd like to.